In this election, Americans have to choose between freedom and chaos. That was Kamala Harris's big message to voters in her highly anticipated closing argument speech in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday night. As was widely expected, the Democratic presidential nominee warned Americans, that Donald Trump is a man consumed by a desire for revenge, and he would open up a floodgate of vengeance against his political rivals, including ordinary citizens. This even as Harris promised that she would work tirelessly for every American. Delivering her speech from the ellipse near the White House, Harris said, "In less than 90 days, either Donald Trump or I will be in the Oval Office. On day one, if elected, Donald Trump would walk into that office with an enemies list. When elected, I will walk in with a to-do list full of priorities on what I will get done for the American people." The site of the speech, carefully chosen by the Harris campaign, was laden with symbolism. The US Vice President stood where Trump had told his supporters on 6th January 2021 to fight like hell, shortly before they ransacked the US Capitol. With the White House illuminated behind her, Kamala Harris asked Americans to elect a new generation of leadership, likening Donald Trump to a petty tyrant who had stood in the very same spot nearly 4 years ago and in a last-ditch effort to cling to power, incited the mob that stormed the US Capitol. Kamala Harris described the 5th November election as an existential choice between the liberties that she promised to protect and the chaos and division that she said would follow Trump back into the White House. She said, "Donald Trump intends to use the United States military against American citizens who simply disagree with him. People he calls the enemy within. This is not a candidate for president who's thinking about how to make your life better. This is someone who's unstable, obsessed with revenge, consumed with grievance, and out for unchecked power. Donald Trump has spent a decade trying to keep the American people divided and afraid of each other. That's who he is, but that's not who we are." The vice president projected herself as the former president's foil, a president who would expand Medicare to cover home health care, where Trump would try to cut the program, a president who would back women's reproductive rights, where Trump would further restrict them, a president who would prize compromise, where Trump feasts on conflict. Harris also made a conspicuous effort to distance herself from the Biden legacy. She said, "My presidency will be different because the challenges we face are different. Our top priority as a nation 4 years ago was to end the pandemic and rescue the economy. Now our biggest challenge is to lower the costs that were rising even before the pandemic and that are still too high." While her speech did not deliver more policy specifics, Harris once again argued that her background, a child of immigrants who became a prosecutor, had prepared her to deliver on her promises. In what would be a matter of grave concern for the Democrats, though, Kamala Harris's lead over Donald Trump seems to have dwindled in the final stretch of the presidential contest, with Harris ahead only by a single percentage point over her Republican rival, 44% to 43% according to a Reuters Ipsos poll that was published on Tuesday. The 3-day poll completed on Sunday shows the race effectively tied ahead of the 5th November election. And the news seems to get worse for Kamala Harris. Donald Trump has nearly erased the Democrats' long-standing advantage among Hispanic men ahead of the election, according to the same Reuters Ipsos poll. The former president now trails Vice President Kamala Harris by just 2 percentage points among Hispanic men, 44% to 46%, compared to his 19-point deficit with Democrat Joe Biden at the same point in 2020. Meanwhile, President Biden has kicked up a storm with his remarks targeting Trump supporters. While slamming and mocking the comedian who spoke at Trump's Madison Square Garden rally and called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage, Biden said the only garbage he saw floating were Trump supporters. Now, could this be a self-goal for the Democrats on the eve of the tight race? Many were quick to draw parallels between Biden's remark to the controversial comment made by Hillary Clinton back in 2016 when she had described Trump supporters as a basket of deplorables. While Clinton too had sought to criticize the racism and misogyny that many Trump supporters had displayed, her remark was widely condemned, and many believe it boomeranged on the then Democratic presidential nominee, who ended up losing the election to Donald Trump despite winning the popular vote. Funnily enough, reacting to all the backlash against him and his supporters following the disparaging and racist remarks about Puerto Ricans made at his Sunday rally, Donald Trump termed the rally an absolute love fest. Comedian Tony Hinchcliffe, one of the speakers who opened for Trump, had called the Caribbean U.S. territory of Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage and disparaged Black Americans, Jewish people and Latinos using racist and vulgar language. Launching some kind of damage control, Trump claimed no president had done more for Puerto Ricans than he had. Former First Lady Michelle Obama rallied young voters in Atlanta, urging them to exercise their voting power in the upcoming election and to recognize their role in shaping America's future. She said critical issues from healthcare to reproductive rights were at stake. Obama reminded the crowd that the race in Georgia was decided by less than 12,000 votes in the 2020 election. The question we're asking on Global Lens tonight is this: with almost every poll suggesting a neck-and-neck race between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, has either candidate managed to tip the scales in their favor and woo the undecided voters with their speeches in the home stretch of the high-stakes election campaign?